Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. To Miss Siti Sarah, we are pair 6, and the topic of our article is that whether can a prison be self-managed? A study of the informal organization of a Bolivian prison.
As for the introduction, the main goal of this research is to look into the Bolivia's unique prison, where the presence of wives and children, self-management of activities within the prison, and the opportunity for inmates to participate in a variety of activities are among the main characteristics. This study describes the general organization of the prison as well as the inmates' experience, particularly on interpersonal level. The data obtained shows that the functional and effective social rehabilitation experience can be promoted even under extreme conditions, and in some cases, this provides important insight into the prison system of the majority of the development country.
And then to the first major subtopic of this article is the scope of study. In the scope of study, there's two major questions involved, which is one being what is a self-organized prison, the house and the what sort of activities that are involved in such a system, and the second major question is what is the experience of prisoners in a self-governing system, especially in terms of interpersonal aspects such as that of prisoners having wives and children inside of the prison, the security, accountability, and the process of the roles the inmates have between one another. And then to the next subtopic of this subtopic is the data collection phase of how the scope of study is being conducted, which is in the fact that there are 23 detainees who are being interviewed and recruited through the snowball sampling technique, which goes to our next subtopic, which is the sampling method. The snowball sampling technique is a process where one prisoner were to be serving as a contact to the group of researchers outside of the prison, whom would spread the words of the interview, the questionnaires, and everything. And these are due to three major reasons in the process of data collection, which is the time limiting factor, that it is not a common subject. Prison itself, and then the number three is the impossibility of interviewing the whole detainees. So that is the sampling method and the data collection process. And then to the third subtopic of the scope of study, it is on the research objectives. It is to describe the prison's general organization, and it is to discuss the inmates' experience of self-managed prison, especially with regards to interpersonal aspects. And then to the subtopic of methodology. The current study employs qualitative research methodology to look into non-generalizable meaning, context, rule of interaction, and points of view. And with that, they also use a grounded theory methodology to capture the voices of the inmates, whose reality of being in prison and subsequent theories about it are being captured. And the tools that are involved in this methods is that the authors use field notes, which is a process of direct observation on field, and semi-structured interviews to gather details regarding the system. The data were analyzed using the grounded theory methodological approach, meaning the procedure involves observation, collection, coding, categorizing data, and hypothesizing theoretical references. The data were then divided into themes and units of analysis based on what had emerged from the interviews.
Okay, the first finding of this research is describing the prison general organization. There are no prison guards or officers. Inmates have access to the cells and can purchase a cell if they have enough money. Many prisoners have different jobs and engage in various daily activities similar to those found in city streets. Solitary cells are located at the prison entrance outside the area occupied by detainees. They are patrolled by guards officers who are also responsible for providing the inmates with the daily food. Children and spouses are free to come and go as they please, but they must pay a small fee to the guards. The prison administration receive a sum of money from the relevant government ministry for each inmate, which is used to purchase food and daily breakfast and communal lunch for the detainees. The second finding of this research is that the idea of reuniting with wife and children is crucial to a better life in prison. Some detainees claim that wife relieved the pains of this infernal prison and that if it hadn't been for her, I would have committed suicide. There was no mention of implication on how the wife can be relieved upon reuniting, nor of the personal or professional experience. Prisoners appears to be torn between exposing their children to the prison environment and exposing them to the risks and the danger they may be faced outside the prison. When the parents are arrested, children in Bolivia do not receive assistance from their extended families or the state. When a mother is arrested, her children may be neglected because it is traditional the woman's responsibility to care for her children. As a result, the best option is often for the wife to move into the jail to support her husband in order to protect the children, also while keeping their family together. The third finding is that the sense of institutional abandonment and adaptive responses. Bolivian prison system is characterized primarily by a lack of service. Almost all respondents said the detainees are left to their own devices. The prisoners' conditions were deplorable, and the phrase "things don't work" was used to describe them. Some people mentioned old walls being broken, electrical system and unsanitary condition. Inmates are encouraged to work in self-organized and self-employed jobs, ranging from barbers, soup manufacturers and public phone operators to soft drink sellers, cleaners and football tournament organizers, just to meet ends meet in the jail. For the fourth finding is that the management for all rather than repressive management. The detainees interviewed repeatedly mentioned previous prisoners' management, specifically the groups of delegates in charge of the previous prisoners. And the previous elections, some argue, were based on the threats and violence by a dominant group. Others argue that because of the population is too large, it is impossible to maintain control over everyone. Or is it possible for a prison to be self-managed? The approach used by the two prisons studied is improvised rather than defined by research studies, and it does not adhere to a specific project intervention. As for the fifth finding is that the research found that the idea of work as a tool for regulating interpersonal relationship in the prison. Prisoners have different perspectives on the values of work in prison. Others contend that a self-organization prison, microeconomy, may be superior to the national economy. Some portrayal of various role and social activities such as priests, teachers, doctors and barbers creates an environment similar to found outside of the prison. This is in stark contrast to most Western prisons where prisoners frequently experience feelings of worthless and squandered time, whereas the suicide rate is significantly low, with the majority of suicide motivated by jealousy or sentimental in the prison of Bolivia. There are numerous limitations to the research that was conducted. The first limitation is that the number of interviews, the lack of time, the precarious condition in which the interviews were conducted are some of the study's limitations. Other limitation was that the obtained text was translated into English, which may be resulted in some idiomatic expression losing the exact meaning. Whereas another limitation was that the interview's lack of a specific knowledge, which varied according to the literacy level, education qualification and activity. Furthermore, in some cases, the author wished to contact detainees again to ask them additional questions, but this was not possible. And another limitation was that the interviewers were held in prison, which was not comfortable or relaxed environment for both researcher and the respondent, because this is one of a kind prison.